Hi, I'm John Smith. I'm a senior at K-State, and I want to share with you my struggle with an eating disorder and compulsive exercise. When I was younger, I had chronic migraines and was sick a lot, and when I went to the doctor, they put me on these steroids to kind of help with the headaches, and what happened was, as a result of those steroids, I gained a lot of weight, and around 4th grade, there was a notable increase in my weight and size. And at school, I was teased a lot for not being the most athletic kid. I talked to girls really easily because my sister was my closest sibling. So I was called gay at school and teased regularly there. And when I was at home, my eating habits and change in size kind of took notice, and I was teased for that. Comments were made about what food I ate, the portions I ate, things like that, as compared to my cousins, and I always felt like I wasn't good enough compared to all of my other friends and my other siblings, being the youngest of 6. So in 5th grade, my mom, from what my mom tells me, I came home one day and told her that I wanted to go on a diet, and she told me that boys my age don't go on diets, but that we could kind of change things. I could start eating healthier and be more active. I started doing Taekwondo, and I remember seeing an ad for it in a Dairy Queen. I filled this thing out to get free lessons, and it was about wanting to be healthier and more fit and active. I kind of fell in love with that the first time I went, and after that, that kind of changed how my athleticism was viewed and how I kind of viewed myself, because I never really thought I was good for anything or athletic enough, or I don't know, I didn't compare. And Taekwondo is where I really started to thrive. I started eating healthier and started manipulating what I ate and started having good foods and bad foods and constructing these ideals of what I needed to be. Throughout the course of the rest of grade school, as my Taekwondo went on, I was getting more involved with that and was really excelling compared to my other classmates. In 7th grade, going into 7th grade, I went to the Junior Olympics and got 3rd. But that summer, when I was training 3 times a day and going to classes with the adults and the kids, because I was at that awkward age. I was just really noticing how much of an effect exercise had on me. So from a young age, I started viewing exercise as the reward, but also something that I had to do, even if I didn't want to. And I started doing better in the school sports I was playing through CYO. I went from being the slowest kid on the track team in 6th grade to being one of the faster people in 8th grade. I was doing better in all the other sports, so I was feeling better about myself competence-wise, but not necessarily physically. I still thought I was that really pudgy 5th grader that just really wanted to change everything about myself. And 8th grade I started playing football, mostly because I have 4 older brothers, and my dad was all about all of his boys playing football and kind of having the All-American experience. For weigh-ins in football in 8th grade, I was really close to the cutoff mark for a lineman, which I remember the cutoff was 135 for 8th graders, and I was 132. So I had to go back to the second weigh-ins just after the start of the season to make sure I was still making weight. And after that first weigh-in, since I was close-ish to being a lineman, I was bound determined not to be. Skipping a lot of meals, lying to my mom about eating breakfast or eating most of my lunch. During that football season in 8th grade, I started purging a lot. I don't really remember the first time I purged, but I remember being at a scout camp and one of my friends got sick, and one of my other friends made just a random comment about how if you throw up you'll feel better, and how his brother did that for wrestling and things like that. And I kind of just took that and ran with it. For that year, I was just really getting rid of anything I put into my body through purging and through exercise, doing all the sports I was doing at that time. I had lost weight by the second weigh-in, and I felt this pride in myself for taking control of that. While I was excelling athletically, I was really just beating myself up inside about how I wasn't comparing physically to the other kids, and how I wasn't, I don't know, I was still teased kind of about being called gay or what have you at school, but it wasn't as severe, and I was more accepted by my friends, but I was still telling myself all those things that I'd been told when I was younger, still calling myself fat and ugly and everything like that. And going into high school, I was going to do cross country, so I started doing fun runs over the summer. And I really wanted to go into high school on like a high note, feeling really good about myself. So when I was running for those, you could go for fun runs and over the summer and kind of like prepare for cross country. That was like the first time I really took running seriously and kind of saw like the benefits of it. And one of my older brothers at the time was really big into lifting weights and exercising and all about protein shakes and supplements and things like that. And I took it upon myself to just eat protein shakes or just eat protein bars, or aside from that I think I ate yogurt. I just really became restrictive in my habits and I stopped purging, but I was doing so much physical activity and eating so little that it just kind of like took over. And my eating habits when school started became quickly known, and it kind of became my identifying factor. The weird thing is that my friends would comment on what I ate. My nickname was Ano by a couple of people, and short for anorexic, which I was like, no, I don't have an eating disorder. I still eat sometimes, so I didn't think that it was something that would affect me. Plus, it was always something that I only thought girls dealt with, so I denied that for like 2 years. Other than cross country, I took up diving and track. Diving was another sport that just kind of really fed my eating disorder. Wearing a Speedo for 3 months really makes you like hyper aware of your body. I became so obsessed with like physical body fat and wanting to not like jiggle, or I didn't want like my Speedo to like look like it was cutting off the circulation in my legs, or I didn't want it to look, I don't know, I was just really hyper aware of how I looked to other people. Things like that kind of progressed throughout freshman year. Over the summer, I started lifeguarding. Again, I was just wearing shorts for the majority of the summer. I started really exercising a lot more, running in my free time and like going to the gym, using the elliptical and just doing a lot of cardio because I knew that it was a good fat burner. Sophomore year, things kind of were the same. My eating habits, if they changed, they got a little bit worse. I don't know, every year I went to the doctor, my weight was going down, which I thought was a good thing. And this whole time I just had this magic number of the weight that I was in 5th grade that I was constantly trying to beat, because I thought if I was lower than that, then I would have beat that like old former self that I'd completely disassociated from. I didn't like the idea of being seen as the same person I was then, by my family, by my friends, and the comments that I got now were based on like how I was eating, how they had seen a difference in my body. I was now thinner and perceivably eating healthier. I loved that attention, but it also just really fueled my eating disorder. The summer after sophomore year, while I was lifeguarding again, I really started noticing that my eating disorder was kind of like taking over. And towards the middle or like end of the summer, I had been weighing myself daily before I went to work, after I got home, multiple times a day, just always wanting to see the number go down and really just basing how I felt about myself off of that number. I'm still striving to get under what I was in 5th grade, and when I really realized that I had an eating disorder is when my weight dropped under that number and it wasn't good enough. I still thought that if I went lower, then I would just be removing all the fat from my body and I would get to a place where I could like start building muscle, because I knew I wasn't very muscular. Like I had muscles, but it was just because I didn't have fat. I didn't necessarily want to be skinny. I wanted to be like thin and lean and have like lean muscle. When my weight dropped under my 5th grade weight, I was kind of scared, because I was happy, but I was also like more determined to see that number go down more. So I reached out to a couple of my friends that had expressed concern over the years. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do, was confront them, admit to them and admit to myself that what I was doing was like really bad for my health, and that it was like actually a problem, that like I was anorexic and exercising and food had just completely taken over every aspect of my life. They helped me think of a way to tell my parents, and I was really afraid to talk to my parents about having an eating disorder. I thought they'd be really embarrassed and ashamed and just like mad at me for kind of putting myself through that, and I didn't really get the reaction I thought I would, which I'm glad now, but I ended up writing them a letter and leaving it for them one morning that I went to work, and I had to go to work really early for like swim lessons or something. I remember getting a text from my mom saying that we needed to talk when I got home. Leading up to the day that I gave my parents that letter, I had 2 panic attacks back to back at the pool, just like so scared of talking to them and admitting to them that I was like doing this like self-destructive behavior daily, and it had been since I was in 5th grade, or at least been having these like self-deprecating thoughts since then. But my parents were really receptive, and they were just so glad that I was being honest with them. They had told me that they had been concerned. My mom had heard things from other parents, especially like the other swimming and diving moms, kind of commenting on how I was thin, how you could like see like my rib cage and things like that. So they weren't surprised. My mom told me that she had actually been wanting to ask my doctor about that and like a suspected eating disorder. I got nothing but love from my parents and my friends that knew that I was finally going to get help for this problem were so supportive and really helped that transition into like changing my mindset a lot easier. So I started seeing a dietitian and a therapist going into junior year. It like helped for a while. I was still really not wanting to give it up, and I didn't, but junior year did get a little bit better at the beginning, but once I started doing, especially diving, my weight just really started plummeting and continued to throughout the summer. And while I had been maintaining around the same weight, by the end of the next summer, my weight had dropped to below what it was when I started seeing my dietitian, and she kind of gave me an ultimatum of either going to treatment or just like really kicking myself into high gear and like doing everything that I needed to on my own. And I went to a leadership camp thing for future pre-med students, and while I was there, I was aware that if my weight went down while I was there, I'd be going to treatment. I really did not try to even get half of my meals in while I was there. When I got home, my weight had gone down, and I think 2 weeks later I was checking into treatment. Very end of the summer, I ended up missing the first week of senior year and getting lots of questions from my friends about where I was, why I wasn't at school. Only a handful of them knew that I was there. While I was in treatment, the first time, it was just I really just wanted to be the good patient. I wanted to do everything I had to, the way the doctors told me, so that my stay there would be as short as possible, and that I would convince myself that I was cured, basically, of my eating disorder. I also started getting treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder. Those two like really went in hand with each other, just like the comorbidity of the two disorders just really, I don't know, played up the severity of it, I guess. So I think like the hardest part that time was actually dealing with the OCD, not so much the eating disorder. Because the eating disorder things I kind of learned what to say, but for the OCD I couldn't like disguise my discomfort, and it was harder for me to like control. But after a month I was discharged, and senior year I was going to like youth counseling groups and seeing my dietitian, psychiatrist, and therapist regularly. And senior year went a lot better. Did a lot better in the sports that I had been doing previously because I was actually nourishing myself. I was happier, like my friends noticed a difference. I still really didn't, I like, had this huge thing about people touching me, and I just hated people, like I hated hugging because people would always comment about like how thin I was then, or like how they could like feel my bones, which was reinforcing, but also like I don't know, it just like messed with my head. So I was like really hated people touching me. But senior year, I was definitely a lot more like active with my friends, and like I said, the sports that I did, I improved in those drastically. And I was just really proud of like the progress I had made, even though after treatment I kind of, my eating disorder like morphed, and certain aspects of it were like really heightened, and I like learned things from other people because eating disorders are like so competitive, and I just was comparing myself to everyone, really just not willing to give it up entirely. So when I went to college, just really tried doing my best about like at least getting all my meals in. I'd adopted like a vegetarian diet, which I was kind of vegetarian before. I kind of like swore off red meat in 8th grade, and then after treatment or after graduation, I cut out the turkey and chicken that I was eating, and so I guess I was like pescatarian because I ate fish occasionally. But it was just developing in a way that I was kind of tricking myself into believing that I was still in recovery or actively in recovery.